Welcome to session number what, 19 of an introduction to biblical prophecy. I'm Dr. John McMath, and I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. We've been going through a variety of theological and biblical topics and sequences for the past 3 years together, and those are stowed away safely in places where nobody will ever find them on Facebook and YouTube. No, frankly, I had somebody looking for my YouTube videos the other day and they couldn't find them. So who knows? The things that tell us how much or how many hits and reads and whatever on both YouTube and the Facebook tell me that there are lots of people tuning in. But frankly, I don't know what to do with that information. Anyway, it's good to see everybody. And for those who are joining by a digital delay and you're tuning in when we're not all together, you're still welcome. It's good to have you here. Okay, today we're going to go on into the notion of God's judgment against Israel and the Jewish people in particular. We've been looking at the concept of the day of the Lord, and I've summarized that by saying that the day of the Lord is a term generically used in the Bible of a time of blessing and curse. And it can be short term, it can be longer term, or it can refer to the end of time. And when we're doing eschatology, when we're studying biblical prophecy, we tend to focus on stuff that's going to happen at the end time. But we shouldn't neglect what the Bible says about the earlier bits of judgment and blessing. Because those help us to understand the context, so we understand what this is really all about. So today we're going to move on. Last time we looked at the notion that the day of the Lord is a time of judgment on the nations, on the Gentile nations of the world. And I specifically last week made a point of narrowing the scope of the Gentiles or the nations to those nations who are historically the enemies of Israel, who are geographically close to Israel, and who in the last 1400 years have been Muslim. So when the Bible says the Gentiles or the nations, particularly in a context of judgment or a context of curse, we always have to ask ourselves: are we talking about everybody in the whole planet, or are we talking about the usual suspects? Yeah, if you read particularly the Old Testament and look at the names of specific people groups who are singled out for judgment at the end time, you will find that all of those nations are today Muslim. Now that's interesting. The modern conflict tells us that Israel's worst enemies on the whole planet, literally on the whole planet, today are Muslim. The people of Hamas are not an outlier. We think, oh, well, there's a couple of dozen really bad guys who've got a 2 million strong civilian population of innocent people under their control, and that's not true. The people of Hamas, the leadership, the so-called warriors, are supported and maintained and surrounded and protected by these so-called innocent civilians. 75% of them agree that this is precisely what the Prophet Muhammad has called them to do. So we have to be realistic about what's actually going on in the modern world and the extent to which that is predicted by biblical prophecy. The Bible predicts that events similar to what we're seeing today will happen in the end time. And the Muslim component is huge. And I'm not being anti-Muslim or Islamophobic or something. I'm just looking at the realities of history and saying that if you can do it, find a people group mentioned for destruction at the end time, which is not Muslim, anywhere in the Old Testament prophets, and I'll buy you coffee. I mean, you won't find them. Now, maybe 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, Islam will have self-destructed and there'll be some new bad guy. I don't think so. But that, I suppose, is always a possibility. It's wrong for us also to say today's the day, the second coming has to happen by Thursday. That's equally as wrong as saying that there is no end time and there's nothing coming. Caution, I think, is always an important thing. But anyway, we're going to look at a different thing today because it's something that we don't often think through, and that is that the people of Israel are also predicted to undergo trouble. The phrase "the day of Jacob's trouble" is found in the Old Testament. I believe that's in Jeremiah, and we find predictions that Israel will undergo judgment, and just like the judgment on the nations as a whole, there is often a near term or even previous judgment that happened, like the judgment that the city of Babylon will fall and its ruins will stay there forever. That was literally fulfilled in the past. Sometimes the judgment prediction is a medium term, something that will happen off in the future, maybe generations in the future, but it will happen. So Moses predicts the Babylonian exile in Deuteronomy, roughly 1,000 years before it happened. That's a medium-term thing. And then there is a very long-term or end-time fulfillment. And so we always have to ask ourselves, what is this fulfillment looking like? Is it possible that this particular prediction has a fulfillment that's already been fulfilled, like the first coming of Christ? All of that has been fulfilled. We're not looking for any more babies to be born in mangers. That's all done. The next time we see Jesus, he's not going to be a helpless little baby. He's going to be a conquering king. The difference between those contexts is actually quite important. And I say all of this because, believe it or not, all of the things that I'm telling you right now are controversial. I, I, was called a heretic online several days ago because of positions like this. It adds a little spice to my day. I think, oh, good, I'm a heretic. Maybe I can go down in the list of the best of them. Okay, so now we're going to look at the God-specific judgment against Israel, against the Jewish people as a whole. Now, there's a difference between Israel and the Jewish people, and I suppose I need to explain that something. There's a difference between Hebrews in general, Israel in particular, and the Jewish people even more particularly. The Hebrews are the people with a Semitic background who form a part of the group that eventually became Israel. Moses organized them and brought them into the land, and it's at that point that they became Israel. The Jews are named after Judah, one of the 12 tribes. And after the fall of the northern kingdom, we'll be looking at for a little bit today. After the fall of the northern kingdom is in 722 BC, we've got the southern kingdom that lived on until 586 and the destruction of Jerusalem. And those people were known as Judea, or the Jews. The term Jew is taken directly from the name Judea, which means the place where Judah lives. The southern kingdom from Jerusalem south to the edge of the Negev desert, and also from the river to the sea. It's interesting that the modern world wants to call that core land, that heartland of Israel, the West Bank. The Bible calls this Judea, the home of Judah, and Samaria, the home of the 10 tribes of the north. Judea and Samaria sounds awfully biblical, sounds very historical. It sounds like the place where this people lived for well over a millennium. Anyway, well, a lot of that is very political. It has a modern political focus to it. I'm going to try to avoid some of that, but let's go on. I'm going to try to share the screen here. Let's see what we can do. Share the screen. There we go. And I'm waiting for it to. There we go. God's judgment against Israel and the Jewish people. One of the first things that is specifically nailed down is that the end of the Jewish kingdom from Jerusalem will come to an end. Jeremiah in the Book of Lamentations makes that clear, and I'm just quoting chapter 2 and verse 1. How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger. Jerusalem is really, really important to Israel. This is the place that Abraham sacrificed Isaac, up in these very mountains. Now, I won't say it's under the Dome of the Rock, but it's up in these mountains. The city of Jerusalem is the place where Melchizedek offered bread and wine to Abraham. The city of Jerusalem is the place that David conquered in 1003 BC to set up the Jewish kingdom over all of Israel. That lasted until 586 BC. So the first real state that ever existed in the so-called promised land was a Jewish state under David. Saul was a king over the northern kingdom, and Judah was never particularly with him. It took David to unite the whole nation and to subjugate the surrounding enemies, so that Solomon, Solomon, the man of peace, the king of peace, could reign in his stead. His son, who would build the temple, and who prefigures the coming Messiah. The Jewish kingdom lasted until the time of the Gentiles overtook it from 606 or 586, depending on how you'd like to count. I prefer 606 when Nebuchadnezzar first arrived. From 606 BC, the Temple Mount, where the Dome of the Rock is located today, has been under the control of Gentiles. This photograph was taken several years ago. You can see that in the background. That's the Dome of the Rock. It was built by a character by the name of Muhawiya as a celebration of the non-deity of Jesus. That's what the Quran is quoted in mosaic tile all the way around the barrel of this Dome of the Rock, proclaiming that God has no children and that Jesus is a prophet and nothing more. Doesn't mention Muhammad, which is interesting, or Islam, but it is rather explicit that Jesus is not God. Some have even argued that the Dome of the Rock is not really originally a Muslim monument, but it was quickly taken over by Muslims. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is about 100 yards away on the edge of the Temple Mount platform, and this whole region is controlled by the Muslim religious authority, the Waqf, WAQF. And I've never been able to pronounce it. But the idea of the destruction of the Jewish kingdom in 586 BC is a part of God's judgment against Israel. And when Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentations, Jerusalem was in the process of falling. So God's judgment against Israel and the Jewish people certainly is something that goes way, way back. Sometimes it's a close-up. The Book of Amos is famous for the little bit about the locusts, and there's some others about locusts in the Old Testament. I got this photograph of a desert locust from the internet. I've got some pictures of grasshoppers, but this is the real thing, the desert locust. He's about 6 inches long, big enough to make a serious noise when a whole flock of them comes in. The book of Deuteronomy tells us, let's see if I can make this come up, that one day the people of Israel would be overwhelmed by a foreign nation. This is what the Lord God has showed me, Amos says in 7:1. Behold, he was forming locusts when the latter growth was just beginning to sprout, and behold, it was the latter growth after the king's mowings. So what is Amos first of all looking at? A very close judgment. And Amos was specifically speaking to the northern kingdom. This is just before the fall of Samaria, 722 BC. And the first episode of that was a locust plague, which in a very short time morphed or changed into the Assyrian armies. The Assyrian armies under not Sennacherib, but Tiglath-Pileser and Sargon destroyed the city of Samaria, which remains in ruins to this day, including Omri's famous palace. He's got an ivory palace there in Samaria, and we can still see some fragments of the ivory from that. And it was the Assyrians who destroyed that. The Romans came much later and rebuilt some of that, but the ancient stuff we can still see. Uh, the the first judgment actually came very soon. An image of locusts and armies going up and down and mountains, but also an Assyrian army, very close. Many of the prophets were looking at a fulfillment of the promises of Deuteronomy, that a nation which rejected the Lord's law would eventually suffer judgment. And that judgment would take the form of a very specific evil thing. Moses in Deuteronomy makes this prophecy of exile very clear. By the way, that's a sacred bull in the background, found in Babylon. Yeah, let's see. Okay, Deuteronomy. Okay, the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' last message to the people of Israel before they would go into the promised land. And in chapters 28 through 30, there's a promise. It's not just a wild prediction, but the promise that if the people of Israel, as a nation, as a society, would obey the laws, the stipulations, the statutes of Torah, then they would be blessed. They'd be blessed when they wake up and when they lie down. They'd be blessed in their fields and blessed at home. They'd be blessed in their work. They'd be blessed by having neighbors who got along with them. Everything would be good if their society was built around the principles of God's word. And if they rejected that, if they chose as a society to walk away from the principles of God's word, the reflection of God's own glory, if they chose as a people to fall short of the glory of God, then there would be punishment. And specifically for the people of Israel, this is predicted to be, first of all, a 70-year Babylonian captivity. Let me see if I can make that come up. Yeah, in verse 36 of chapter 28 of Deuteronomy, the Lord will bring you and your king, whom you set over you, to a nation that neither you nor your fathers have known. There you shall serve other gods of wood and stone, and you shall become a horror, a proverb, and a byword among all the peoples, where the Lord will lead you away. Well, that's exactly what happened. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 25, I believe about verse 10, says that this particular exile will last for 70 years. Daniel in chapter 9, actually in chapter the beginning of his prayer prior to the 77s prophecy, had been reading Jeremiah and recognized that Jeremiah had predicted a 70-year captivity, an exile. So there is this prophecy of an exile, and there is a prophecy of the 70-year extent of that exile. There is also a prophecy of a much larger diaspora, a dispersion. This little bit of ruins is a shot from Ephesus in Western Turkey. And this is apparently the ruins of the synagogue of Ephesus, from biblical times, New Testament times. Why do I pick on Ephesus right now? Because there is a larger dispersion of the Jewish people that took place after the 70 years of exile of Judea into the Babylonian kingdom. After that, large numbers of Jewish people stayed in exile. At first, that was in Babylon and then Persia, so Mesopotamia in general, and in Egypt. But those people also began to wander. By New Testament times, we find Jewish settlements all over the Mediterranean world and moving farther east. There are synagogues from this period in places as far flung as India. What were they doing in India? Well, there was a community of Jews living in India. They were dispersed all over the Eurasian continent. We see them around the northern rim of North Africa, and all around the northern rim of the Mediterranean Sea in all of the lands of the Roman Empire. Now, after the New Testament period, the Romans in Israel decided that it was time to make all of the Jews go away, and so they further exiled the Jews from Jerusalem and the area. There were a few who continued to live in other places, even a few that continued to live in Jerusalem, but the vast majority of Jews from around 100 AD, in the time after the beginning of the church, Jews were exiled to every part of the world. And today it's actually possible to find Jews literally everywhere. They are found in all of the parts of the earth. This is here in North Idaho. We don't have a really large Jewish community, but they're here. There's a synagogue in Spokane, which is only 45 minutes away. The Jews are present literally everywhere. I've met Jews in Israel from everywhere. I met Irish Jews and South African Jews and Australian Jews, Japanese Jews of all things. I found Jewish people who have either emigrated to Israel or come to visit for a short time back in Israel, and they're from all over the world. The Bible actually predicts this larger diaspora. And let's see if I can put that. This is a dispersion, like if you were to spray an air cleaner, around it spreads out, it disperses all through the room, and this we call a diaspora. The Jews going all over the world. Deuteronomy 28. This is that same passage. This is verse 64. The Lord will scatter you among all peoples, from one end of the earth to the other. And there you shall serve other gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your fathers have known. And among these nations you shall find no respite. There shall be no resting place for the sole of your foot. But the Lord will give you there a trembling heart and failing eyes and a languishing soul. Moses is predicting here that because the people of Israel, first of all, will reject the principles of Torah, they will walk away from the words of God. They're going to undergo a judgment. And that further, and perhaps more importantly, when they one day reject the embodiment of Torah in the character of Christ the Messiah, uh, having rejected the Messiah, they will endure a scattering and a restlessness, meaning literally just what we say, a lack of rest. There is no place that the Jewish people have been able to call their own. Uh, Now, there are nations on earth who don't have states. I was reading just this morning about the Kurdish people of northern Mesopotamia, the intersection land between Iraq and Iran and Syria and Turkey and Armenia and Azerbaijan, the same people group. And some of those are Muslim. Some of them are kind of Jewish. Some of them are Christian. But they're a unique people group. For a while, the U.S. policy seemed to be that the Kurdish people ought to have a national solution, but that stopped being popular for reasons I don't understand. Maybe it was too just. I don't know. Uh, but that's what about the Kurds? They aren't. They have an actual homeland. A place is called Kurdistan, but they've never had their own independent nation state. So what about the Kurds? What about the Basques in Spain? They're actually in the border country between Spain and France, up in the mountains there. What is that? The Pyrenees? Forgotten the name of the mountains there, but the Basque people have wanted their own independent country forever and ever. They don't have it, and they're not likely to have it because there just aren't enough of them to make a whole country. The same is probably true of the Kurds. They're always going to want it and never have it. The Jews have been denied a homeland for thousands of years. Now they've had their homeland. They initially founded and prospered as the people of Israel. And that's not an ethnic group. There's a specific geographical place where this people group belonged. And one of the great elements of the curse on Israel for her rejection of Torah and the rejection of the living Torah, the Messiah, is this diaspora, the scattering among the peoples. Uh, as we move into the end time blessings, we're going to see that there is also a reversal of the diaspora that is predicted in this same book of Deuteronomy. But we'll get there. And the prophets say there will be a return from the dispersion or the diaspora. And we're actually experiencing that in the modern world. We'll look at some of the details of that probably next week. Looks like I'm not going to get there this morning. We've got enough to keep us busy here. Now, what else is there in the whole prophetic tenor of things? Says there's going to be in the end time a broader time of trouble. A term that is sometimes called the day of Jacob's trouble, a time of tribulation, such as has never been or ever will be. It's this great closing thing. Book of Daniel lays this out as the 70th week of the 77s. This closing episode is also a time when the nations, the Gentiles, the surrounding armies of darkness will try to destroy Israel. This would be the day of Jacob's trouble. Zephaniah 1:15 is a great verse. Zephaniah has a whole bunch to say about end times events, and just understanding it is difficult. There's a lot of symbolic language, a lot of what we call apocalyptic language. But look at 1:15. A day of wrath is that day. He's talking about the day of Yahweh, or the day of the Lord. A day of wrath is that day, a day of distress and anguish, a day of ruin and devastation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Alas, that day is so great there is none like it. It is a time of distress for Jacob. Then his last verse, yet he shall be saved out of it. What's what's going on here? A terrible day of trouble, and yet salvation for Israel will come out of that. So this is a closing episode. This broader time of trouble is a closing episode, a 7-year period of great trouble for Jacob. Now you'll notice a couple of things that should be fairly obvious here. One, Jacob or Israel is clearly a recognizable people group at the end of time. So no number of attempted acts of genocide will destroy the Jews. There will always be enough of them that they can endure yet another episode of trouble. Some people have been suggesting that what's happening the last couple of months with Hamas and the Gaza Strip has got to be the tribulation period. I don't think so. It doesn't match. But the characteristic of the period is a continuing time of trouble for Jacob, for the Jewish people. That day is so great, there is none like it. When it happens, it will be out of all comparison the most horrific thing that has ever happened to Israel. And yet, Jacob shall be saved out of it. Now, that's a passage that is quoted or at least alluded to in the book of Romans, in Romans 11, when Paul says, and yet all Israel shall be saved. This is what he's looking at. That's not necessarily referring to the spiritual salvation, although that's again what Jeremiah is predicting in his new covenant. There's a time coming when all of Israel at that particular moment in history shall be saved out of that tribulation period. And some way or another, we have to make sense of what's going on there. So what else is a characteristic of this end time? There's going to be a war. Well, there's always been wars. True enough. This is a great war that will characterize the end time. There's three specific named wars that seem to be defined or describing the same general time period, what we call Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 38, the War of Three Kings in Daniel 11, and the Battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation, chapter 16 and on. This war is, I believe, a single final war with a variety of battles fought in different places, but all focused on Jerusalem and on the people of Israel. and the nations who are hostile to Israel will make a great climactic war against the Jewish nation. And this will be a battle for Jerusalem. I think it's important to emphasize that this is a war for Jerusalem. That city of Jerusalem has tremendous symbolic importance. This is the place where David's uh, uh, kingdom was established. This is the place where the temple was built. This is the place where Jesus went to the cross. This is a place of great importance for Jews and for Christians. Much as we might disagree with one another over specific meanings of all of history, and there's a lot of disagreement to go around here, uh, Jews and Christians both recognize a common heritage that includes Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be a focus of the end of time. So let's look at those specifically. The book of or the uh, and yeah, I know this is Hamas. Um, I think Hamas will be a part of the Gog and Magog battle. I honestly do. Whether what we're seeing today is Gog and Magog or not, I don't know. But I can virtually guarantee that the people who are being prepared today to be suicide bombers and the uh, uh, rapists and mutilators of Jewish civilians, like these boys here, uh, are going to be part of the climactic battle. So the nations are going to get together and do this very, very bad thing. I'm turning over to the book of Ezekiel. Let's see what I've got here. Ezekiel 38, verse 2. Actually, I start in verse 1. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Okay. So Gog of the land of Magog is some kind of a leader. He's the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, which are two places that are difficult to identify. I'm not going to worry too much about identifying them. They're in West Central Asia, just in general. Some have put Meshech as far east as the area around northern Turkey and the Black Sea. Some put Meshech farther to the east. Tubal is sometimes as far to the east as Scythia, in between the Caspian Sea and whatever the next one over is there, the White Sea. I've forgotten the name of it there, in the regions north of Iran and Afghanistan. Up in the other stand would be Tubal. What Gog of the land of Magog probably isn't is Russia. Now the Russians may be involved in the thing, but I don't believe Gog is Russia. The name itself is not found anywhere else. It's an ugly name. It gives us the impression of a great, awful, monstrous character. The same is true of the term Magog. There is no extra biblical or even elsewhere in the Bible historical data to help us identify where that is. But it's this ugly army that will come up out of the north and be allied with some more. This is also Ezekiel 38, down at verse 5. Let me read it from that time. Chief prince of Meshech, say, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I'm against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn you about and put hooks in your jaws. I will bring you out in all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host, all of them with buckler and shield wielding swords. Persia, Cush, and Put are with them. Now, Persia, of course, is modern Iran. Persia historically has included most of Mesopotamia. Cush and Put are most of North Africa. So here what we're seeing is a large army from the north and east, which is Persia, and a large army from the lands to the south of Israel, North Africa, which would include Egypt, Libya, the Sudan. All of this is today, of course, Muslim countries. Gomer, the Cimmerians, are from Turkey, but Togarma is also from the regions of Turkey, central to northern Turkey. So if we will look just specifically at the nature of these folks, where they're from, who they are, these are mostly descendants of or practice the religion of those who historically have hated Israel. These are entirely Muslim countries. I'm not expecting Canada or the Philippines or the Italians, especially under Maloney. I like that lady. United States is not mentioned in the Bible, but these countries are. It's just the way it goes. Another description of the same thing. This Gog and Magog battle goes on for quite a while. The description of it. Persia, Cush put with them, and I missed a bit of it. Verse 7, be ready, keep ready, you and all your hosts. After many days, you will be mustered. This is verse 8 of Ezekiel 38. When will this happen? After many days. From Ezekiel's time, around 600 BC, it was going to be many days before this great battle takes place. When will that be? Well, we're not told, but it will be at the end of this time. It will be a time when Israel exists at peace, more or less, and when the nations that surround Israel will attack. That's the picture that we're getting here. And Israel is gathered in the latter years. This is verse 8 still. You will gather against the land that is restored from war, whose people were gathered from many peoples upon the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste. Its people were brought out from the peoples and now dwell securely, all of them. You will advance, coming on like a storm, and you will be like a cloud covering the land, you and all your hordes, and the many peoples with you. And so there's a description of this battle. It presupposes the return of the people of Israel to the land and the development of a system of security that can keep them reasonably safe. That, of course, has happened within the last 100 years. Again, I don't say this has to be understood this way, but it's the easiest way to understand it. So this is a battle that fits at the end time and that easily fits the historical lineup that we have in the Middle East today. Another battle that we see described in the book of Daniel. Let's see if I can find a book of Daniel here. Daniel. called the War of Three Kings. And we called it the War of Three Kings for the simple reason that there appear to be three kings described here. What else can you say? War of Three Kings is described in Daniel 11, beginning at verse 40. Let's see here. We're in verse 36 of Daniel 11. We come to the end of the historical description, and we begin to see a future description of this evil king. This is no longer Antiochus Epiphanes, but yet another evil king. The king will do as he wills, verse 38. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. So whoever this character is, he is probably not traditionally religious. Okay, we've described him as the Antichrist in other contexts, and here is this godless, evil leader, and he's being described here, this anti-God king, and he will speak astonishing things against the God of gods, the God of reality. Yahweh in the Old Testament, Jesus in the New Testament, the triune God of creation and reality, is the enemy of every tyrant. And the Antichrist desires above all things to have power. If there were a ring of power, the Antichrist would want it. He wants it. And he shall prosper till the judgment is accomplished, for that which is decreed shall be done. And he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay any attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. This is not a nice guy. We just don't like him. So that's the him. We're talking about this anti-God, anti-Christ character. And at the time of the end, in verse 40, the king of the south shall attack him. Okay, so we've got this, the king of the south is a second king. The main king is the him, which is the Antichrist, who is set up in Jerusalem. And the king of the south shall attack him. King of the south? Who is the king of the south? This is a coalition of southern powers. Egypt, Libya, Sudan, Ethiopia to some extent, the Arabians, particularly the Houthi in Yemen. Who knows? That's the way things line up today. How will it line up at that time? The king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind. The him is still this Antichrist king. So you've got three kings going on: the king of the south, the king of the north, Turkey, Mesopotamia, Persia or Iran, the former stands. Again, this is a Muslim thing, with chariots and horsemen rushing like a whirlwind, and with many ships. And he shall come into countries and overflow and pass through. He, the Antichrist, he shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand. What's it all mean? We won't understand for a while. Interestingly, some of those who are going to be delivered, Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. Edom, Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. This is modern Jordan, is somehow going to be delivered. Why is that important? We don't know. And he, Antichrist, will stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. A lot of detail there. I would call it tantalizing detail. It's difficult to understand how it all fits into everything else, but you'll notice that the same characters are in play. And it sounds an awful lot like the coalition of Gog and Magog is falling apart and fighting one another. Is this all a part of the same battle? Well, no, but it's all a part of the same era of conflict. The New Testament uses the term Armageddon, which is a really, really interesting term. It's a Har Megiddo is literally the mountain of Megiddo. I'm to take this picture of this dove or pigeon, whatever he is. I was standing on the modern archaeological site of Megiddo and looking out toward the broad valley of Jezreel. It's traditional to assume that this most famous battlefield in the world, battles have been fought in this place in the valley, not so much on the mountain, but in the valley at its foot, for at least 5,000 years. I looked through history several years ago. I was doing a lunch speech to a bunch of engineers, and I spoke about the battles of Armageddon because they've been going on for 5,000 years. I can give you pictures, archaeological and historical background for at least 28 separate great battles that took place in this very spot. About a third of them are biblical, but we have the kings of Egypt coming through this place. A fellow by the name of not King Tut, Tutmosis III. Tutmosis III came through here on his way to someplace else, and he decided that of the three routes to get through the mountain of Megiddo, he would go the central route. There are three of them, and his advisors said sneak around the outer ways, and not Tutmosis, Ramses the First, said they'll be expecting me to sneak around. The place they won't expect me to come through is right through the middle, and that happened around 1500 BC. This is a long time ago. The various kings and various armies have always thought this would be a good place for a battle. One of my favorite authors very recently came up with an article arguing that Magadan is actually a word that refers to a fortress. And he argues that the Battle of Armageddon is actually going to happen at a fortress that protects the city of Jerusalem from a northern invasion. And that perhaps that fits the Valley of Jezreel. It's overlooked by the Tell of Megiddo. Perhaps it's farther to the south. At any rate, very, very big battle. And Revelation chapter 16 begins this thing. And here we see the demonic spirits performing signs who go abroad to the kings of the whole world, which might at that time actually include the whole world, to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. There's the day of the Lord again. The great day of God the Almighty, and they assembled them to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. This judgment on the nations of the earth will take the form of the unhappiness that comes from trying to build a society without the God of reality. It comes in the form of conflict with one another, and with the people of God, the Jewish people. There is a core hatred of the Jewish people that seems to characterize many of the nations of the world. There was a vote the other day of condemnation of Israel for the occupation and genocide of Gaza. Neither of which is true, but whatever. The United Nations has never been heavily committed to the truth of anything. And there at the United Nations, they took a vote to condemn Israel, and it was whatever, 205 to 4, or a couple of little countries. United States happened to be among them that didn't vote for the eradication of Israel. And everybody else hates little Israel. It's like the whole world now is assembled and taking the side of the classic usual suspects, the Muslim nations that surround Israel. Something bad is happening. I'm not sure if this is the final thing. I believe it's more likely that this is a prelude. But we're living in a very interesting time. I believe we're living in a period of time that comes close to the final struggle, and this idea of a massive struggle over Jerusalem is hitting awfully close to home. We're seeing an awful lot of this now. There've been a few tantalizing suggestions in the midst of all of this that Israel will be delivered from the midst of all this. There is a future deliverance of the Jewish people. Frankly, I think they deserve it. I think they may be God's chosen people, but as Tavia says in Fiddler on the Roof, would it spoil some vast eternal plan if you could choose somebody else once in a while? It seems that there's nothing but trouble. And perhaps God is about to change their fortunes. And Messiah will arrive to change their hearts and to give them peace and to give them rest in the land that God so long ago promised them. That's my prayer. I'm hoping that this is the time that that God will finally end it all, and the people of Israel will see the truth, and will begin to rejoice in the Christ who died for them. Anyway, that's my position. Next week we'll look at the promise of deliverance for Israel, as well as the whole rest of creation. That also is a part of the day of the Lord. So let me make this go away. See if I can stop the share. There it goes. All right. And unmute everybody. Guys, next week we'll continue. We'll probably finish up the Day of the Lord material next week. If you have questions, be sure and pop off at me on Messenger, or you can even get me here, maybe on chat. I kind of try to watch that, but it's on a different screen. And as you have questions, which I know you have to have because this is very complex stuff. Please ask. I'll go out of my way to lecture through those or to handle your questions individually, because I want you to understand what this actually teaches. When we get done with a lot of this down in the weeds end time prophecy stuff, I need to make another emphasis that this is not necessarily a salvation issue. I know lots of saved people who disagree with me on these things. I'm not sure that there are very many saved people who are calling me a heretic because of it. I wonder where they're coming from. I'm not a heretic. I'm just teaching what the Bible teaches. But I do disagree with an awful lot of Protestant and Catholic theologians on these issues. So you should be aware of that. I'm not condemning them. And I wish they wouldn't condemn me. We ought to have in common that we're interested in discovering what the Bible actually teaches. So enough of that. Thank you for being here. Love you guys. I really enjoy these times. I hope this is of value for all of you as well. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All
John.
right. Brother Joel and Oscar,
Ciao, ciao.
all the rest, and the Lees and Alex. I see Alex over there. Okay, let's see if I can find my button. Where's my button? Bye-bye, Oscar.
Where's your button?
Bye-bye, Roger.